Hi, I'm Hannah from the Ministry of Eco-Education. We're the charity supporting teachers to weave sustainability through their teaching. Welcome to the second in our series of summer online panel discussions exploring big questions in education. At the ME, we've brought together resources and opportunities from hundreds of organisations into learning journeys framed by big questions like, where did our food come from? Where should we get our food? And should we all go vegan? Today, we're exploring the school food standards. Can school food be good for us and the planet? I'm joined by a wonderful panel, including Martin from ProVeg, Maisie from the Great Plate, and Flora from Plant-Based Schools UK. We'll start in a moment with each of the panelists sharing their response to the question, and then we'll open it up to a wider discussion, and you can pop any questions in the chat and Paul will check those on those. So just a little bit of a background now. At present, 1 in 3 children are overweight or obese by the time they leave primary school. This is leading to more cases of type 2 diabetes, asthma and high blood pressure in children. More than 21,000 children a year admitted to hospital because of tooth decay, compared to about 13,000 for acute tonsillitis. Food production accounts for over a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions, and half of the world's habitable land is used for agriculture. Early this year, the government released a new draft guidance for school meals for primary and secondary schools, including breakfast clubs, and they are currently hosting an online consultation which ends on the 12th of June. The proposed standards include increasing fruit and vegetables and whole grains, and restricting foods that are high in fat, salt and sugar, as well as low quality reformed or reconstituted foods. Current standards require a portion of food containing milk or dairy to be there every day, and a portion of meat or poultry to be on the menu 3 times a week. Children in reception years 1 and 2 receive free school meals, and children in London, all primary children in London, get a free school meal. And the funding for meals has always been chronically underfunded. There are a variety of organisations and coalitions supporting food and lobbying for the government to be linked to school food. Most recently, the School Food Project has raised £2.3 million to support schools in implementing the new standards by 2027. That includes 5 of the UK's leading food and education organisations. So Bite Back, Chefs in Schools, Jamie Oliver Group and School Food Matters. So school lunches should be a pleasurable experience, giving pupils time with adults and peers, time to talk, to communicate, to develop positive experiences with food and food choices. And as well as the planet, food choices impact on pupils' health, well-being and their ability to learn. So at my school, I love a school lunch. I currently teach in nursery, so my children do not actually stay for a school lunch, but I do like to go have a school lunch with the older children. It's a really nice time to talk. It's a nice time to just have time with them where you're not constantly sticking to a timetable. I'm also very passionate about we grow our own school grow our own food. So we work with Grow to School, and we've got a really good diary of what we're going to plant. Today, Eco Council have been topping up the veg box ready for, hopefully, going to the Yorkshire Show. So they've been planting radishes and lettuce. So they're finding out about the food that they can then eat, and they can try, and they can see that journey. And for some children, their school lunch is perhaps the only sit-down meal they have. Could be the only meal they have, so it's so important that they're a healthy person on a healthy planet as well, because then they're going to thrive. So going to our panel now. So our question today is school food standards. Can school food be good for us and our planet? So first of all, I'd like to welcome Martin. Okay, so Martin is one of our Ministry of Eco Education activators. He's used his teaching experience to engage, inform, and educate children about their food they eat, where it comes from and how it's made, and how it impacts on our health and the planet. Okay, so Martin is the education manager at ProVeg, and that hosts the School Plates program. So welcome, Martin.
Thanks for that. So I'm Martin. I'm from ProVeg UK. So yeah, we help schools ensure kind of children are served meals that are healthy, but also have a minimal environmental impact. We do this by trying to increase kind of the quality, the quantity, and then ultimately the uptake of plant-based food and more plants on plates. Whether that's sort of menu consultation, recipes, chef training, and pupil education, the bit I do. So the simple answer kind of to your question is yes. But the current reality is broadly it isn't, and largely not for us nor for the planet. Under the kind of current school food standards, a portion of meat or poultry has to be served at least 3 times a week. Schools must serve oily fish at least once every 3 weeks. A portion of food containing milk or dairy must be provided every day. So, kind of a lot of food that is scientifically proven to be damaging to our health and the planet are embedded within the current standards as what we class as like must have. What's good though, I guess, is right now there is a government consultation around updating the school food standards. They were last updated in 2014, so over 10 years ago, so quite a long time ago. A lot of things have changed. The new updates, I guess, trying to bring school food more in line with some of the latest nutritional guidance, I guess is the way they would sort of word it. The document and the framework, kind of the main drivers, are public health concerns. I would say that's the bigger side of things. So tackling obesity, fiber, reduction in salt and sugar, things like that, which obviously really important and definitely great. But actually, the mandated menu changes also strongly align with wider environmental issues as well. As many of us know, a lot of us proclaim, health and sustainability in food kind of comes hand in hand. It's kind of a win-win. So that's sort of a positive for the new school food standards, I think. So one of the things is about the mandating pulses. New regulations trying to get schools to serve at least one portion of pulses a week. So I'd say it's not great, but it opens the door of hope. I think that's sort of the way you'd look at it. Most effective way, I guess, is having pulses and legumes and things being an option every single day and centering around that. But if not, I think it should be in the standards at least 3 times a week, just like meat is now. Why not flip it on its head and have kind of the vegetables and the plants being the must have and the meat being the sort of hidden bit elsewhere on the menu? And the other thing, I suppose, is yeah, this shift to whole foods. So big desire to get school menus towards whole foods, whole grains, fruits, and cutting back processed meats, which I think everyone is probably in agreement with. It's probably fairly hard to find someone that doesn't agree with all of that. Um, Now, there isn't really making meat and taking it off and banning it entirely. That isn't part of it. So the framework kind of aims to reduce the amount of meat, the meat consumption, especially the highly processed meat products. So ending the requirement of having meat on that menu gives schools the opportunity to meet protein requirements kind of however they want, whether that's through beans, pulses, other plant-based proteins, sorry, like tofu. But I think it's important that they issue guidance around this to support that uptake because these are going to be new dishes to some of the kids and they're going to need schools are going to need help to do that. I mean, we do a lot about nudges and behavior nudges towards those choices. So the descriptions on the menu, the language that's used to describe them, making those options the default option or moving them higher on menu. So little changes that can kind of have a big impact. Uh, Probably another point to make is around money. Unfortunately, money talks. So the UK government allocates, I think at the moment, £2.61 to school meals per pupil in England. And of every study, every reality that I've read, it's closer to three or above for an actual meal. And so we can't really ignore the sort of cost implications of everything around school food. But generally, plant-based foods are generally cheaper than animal-based products. So kind of the financials should stack up as well. So the framework, yeah, requires us sort of heavily on the health benefits, I'd say, and the practical nutritional aspects of school food. We kind of want to see it to be bigger than that. And kind of everyone's sort of responding to the consultation at the moment. I'm sure we'll hear more about that from the others. So it'd be great if the school food standards were part of a bigger thing and mesh with sort of a broader, legally backed food strategy across the UK that kind of enforces this lower climate impact, promoting local, sustainable, environmental food across public food, public health, farming, supply chain, sort of everything was sort of linked together. So to answer the question, yeah, of course, school food can be good for the planet and for us. It's what we kind of do as an organisation, what we hope for, but there's a lot of nuances around that. And sort of ideally, it would be part of kind of a large scale food strategy, really. And if that's not the case, because I'm sure it won't be the case, then maybe if this is wholeheartedly supported, fully resourced, fully financed, this could be kind of a trailblazer project for showing what's actually possible and sort of what we class as our school food revolution. So the answer is yes, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, thank you so much, Martin. That was, yeah, really interesting. Thank you. So our next panelist now is Flora, and Flora works for Plant-Based Schools, a parent-led community making compassionate and sustainable plant-based food the norm across schools in UK, building on the success of plant-based councils and plant-based universities. So welcome, Flora.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you, Hannah, for that lovely introduction. I'm Flora. I work as plant-based schools coordinator, previously focusing on building kind of parent and teacher communities in London to advocate for plant-based food in schools. And now we are broadening our reach to work on this nationally. And what a perfect time to do so with the school food standards being in review now. To answer your question, I think my response is going to be a little bit similar to Martin, but with also our organizational differences. So currently school food is not protecting kids at all. Um, Schools are like among the most influential institutions in our society, and they play a crucial role in shaping the values and habits and understandings of children and future generations. Um, so through the food that they're served every day at lunch, um, children are fed what they are fed now dictates what they'll see as normal and healthy and ethical to eat. So because of this, schools have a duty of care to provide food that is not only nutritious for children, but also sustainable. Um, so currently, they're completely failing to act in this way. They're failing to secure children a livable future. We're living through, an unprecedented global climate emergency with the window to kind of protect a safe future for the next generation rapidly closing. Climate scientists warn the world is likely to exceed 1.5 degrees of warming within the next decade, which obviously sharply increases the risk of irreversible climate damage. And as we all know, so the meat, dairy, and fish industries are one of, if not the leading drivers of the biggest causes of environmental destruction worldwide. And yet most schools continue serving animal products every day and are literally feeding children the very food that is threatening their future. Um, and as you mentioned, Hannah, so yeah, schools are also failing children based on the health aspect of the food that they provide. So yeah, I mean that statistic where 1 in 3 kids are obese by the time they leave primary school is just absolutely horrendous. And too often school meals are highly processed and packed with sugar and saturated fat, which is just leads to these horrible outcomes. And also children then think that this is normal to eat and take it on to their later lives. But also the current school food are failing vegan children and children with food allergies or religious beliefs, or children that don't, I guess, follow the natural meat and two veg diet that is kind of pushed by the status quo. And at plant-based schools, like we regularly hear stories of vegan children being offered no more than just jacket potato and beans every day for lunch, or even being fed animal products due to a lack of education of staff. And if they had an allergy to some of those products, then that could be deadly. So by updating the school food standards to include more pulses and legumes and plant-based food as the norm, is going to be able to mitigate for these. So yeah. So as Martin said, for over 10 years, the school food standards have mandated that meat should be served 3 times a week, fish every 2 weeks, and dairy every day. So not only is this poorly educating children about the source of nutrients, as there is that kind of myth that you can only get protein from animal products, which is obviously completely false. But also these foods are not good quality, and they're not required to be of good quality. So processed meats and other healthy options have fallen into this bracket for years, unchecked. But luckily, with the new proposal, this no longer will be the case, hopefully, for the most part anyway. So the new school food standards are a breath of fresh air with legumes and pulses are going to be included as part of the protein mandate. With, as Martin said, at least 1 meal a week to be included with them. So hopefully, that will open up the options to be provided more for kids. So if passed as proposed, this will take down the legal guardrails for schools to serve what they want, which will be beneficial, I guess, for us as advocates to make positive change. So previously, at plant-based schools, we've been asking for schools to provide at least a plant-based option every single day. So, vegan kids can have a chance to eat what they want to eat, but also for other children to normalize plant-based food and give them that option as well. But now schools will have the freedom to choose with the guidance to provide healthier meals for kids. And so this will mean that plants will have an opportunity to take center stage and enrich the health of children across the country by providing more fiber and nutrients. So yeah. So obviously, this is like a major legislative change, which will have like a tangible, massive impact on children's health and the environment and animals, if implemented effectively by transitioning school food to contain more nutrients such as fiber and other things that come from plants. But it'll also normalize pulses and legumes as legitimate protein sources, which will teach children from a young age that meat and fish are not required to complete a meal, which will instill healthy habits in children for years to come and may help positively influence their parents and home life and wider society. I really liked what you said, Martin, about making it being much wider than just the school food revolution and it having a much further impact. But however, legislation isn't the only way to encourage change. And without public support, this potentially could receive massive backlash or even be overturned if new governments disagree with the changes made or the changes aren't issued in the way that we hope. So in light of this, that's where I guess plant-based schools and other grassroots initiatives come into effect to change the hearts and minds like on the ground and within the community, because community is just as important, if not more so, than the top-down legislative change. So the school food standards updates are going to be an effective tool to bring the change we need, but much more work needs to be done to ensure that the food provided will be delicious, nutritious, and facilitate the social transition to acceptance of a plant or of a predominantly plant-based food system. So to answer your question, Hannah, yes, school food can be good for us. It's not currently good for us, but it's going to get a whole lot better. But we all need to work together in communities and across organizations to make this change a reality. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Flora. And like you said, I think you used the word duty of care, and it's that safeguarding. It is about what those children put into their bodies is going to have a massive effect on their health, their well-being, their ability to learn. if they've had something really sugary and then they're really dropping, they're not going to be able to concentrate. If they're not hydrated, it's such an important thing. And finally, last but not least, Maisie from the Great Plate CIC. So you provide the school for Mitchinhampton, it's where MEE began. And it was there that you hosted Stephen Morgan, MP. The Great Plate is more than a school lunch service. It's a CIC committed to promoting children's health and inspiring healthy eating habits. And that's reflected in every meal that is served. In a culture where the school prioritizes nutrition and benefits from a wholesome, nutritious, tasty lunch that is good for their body and for their mind. So welcome, Maisie.
Thank you very much for Hannah, and brilliant, Flora and Martin, really important and excellent things. I suppose I'm coming from a slightly different perspective. We are a third-party caterer, and we currently serve 17, soon to be 21 schools in the Gloucestershire and surrounding areas. And just as Hannah described, that is exactly what we're all about. We cook everything from scratch. We use as local as we possibly can. We're very, very conscious of where the food that we are serving comes from and what it is. And we try to make sure that it is culturally and sustainably respectable for everybody. It's a really interesting one in general as a topic, because ultimately you want to jump in and say, yes, absolutely, food in schools can be all those things, but there are so many sort of strange barriers for us to get there. And one of those, I think, is, of course, money. And what makes us different from a lot of other third-party contractors is, of course, we aren't looking to make any sort of profit. And that, for me, is one of the biggest barriers for all good things around school food, is when we allow profit-making companies to access our schools where the government is setting an already very low budget and allowing them to squeeze that budget to try and get more for themselves out of that than prioritizing the food and the children themselves. So I think that's one massive barrier, and that in itself is one challenge. And even those of us that are doing this independently or on a small scale, because we are a very small scale compared to a lot of providers out there, the finances do make that very difficult. We obviously have to respect and follow the current guidelines, which I would agree are inadequate, and I am very excited by a lot of the new proposals that are coming in. A lot of them we actually already do anyway. So you guys were talking a lot about pulses and things like that. They appear on our menu a lot more than once a week anyway, and we would supplement things with pulses. So, for example, if it was a cottage pie on the menu, as well as having beef in it, we would do a split between the amount of beef, and we would add in red or green lentils, things like that as well. So we try and add lots of things anyway. And I would absolutely welcome less desserts, lots more fruit. Getting lots of fibre into the kids is brilliant. But of course, there are then cost implications. We do run at a loss, so a big part of my job is to go out and find and access grants and funding from other places so that we can make the work that we do function. But it's really important to all of us here, and we're part of a bigger network of social enterprises that are all trying to do important things within our local community. So I think that is definitely, the money is a really big barrier to getting sustainable. But also I think it's very interesting once you are a service provider, the feedback that comes, because it all sounds incredibly positive, and certainly we think so, but it's interesting to hear schools and parent feedback. And it very often, if something is new or unfamiliar, that can feel very scary and you can get pushback. A really funny example would be, when we introduce something that is a dish that isn't familiar, and that might just be as simple as a Thai curry, a Thai vegetable curry or something, people will push back because it's not something they've seen before. Why are you offering the children that? We think exposure is great. We also work with chefs in schools. All of our staff are going through their chef trainer program at the moment. And we've also been doing their Try It initiative. And every Friday we do a different fruit or vegetable in addition to the meal that kids who are either having a packed lunch or the main meal can just come and try. And we do a little fact sheet. We think exposure is so important. Just keep pushing out something so that people can try it or look at it or smell it. You don't have to taste something to see if it might be something you'd be interested in later on in life. But it definitely is one of those things that I think it takes a whole community for change to really come into effect. So we can write new legislation and we can put down new rules, but whether they actually become embedded in the culture of a school is a totally different matter. I don't know about the others, but very often we see on a school menu, it looks great in principle, but it isn't actually what is being served. And I think that ensuring that the new standards, hopefully when they come in, are monitored, I think is a really big and important thing, because it's got to be followed through. And I don't know that I think schools have got enough resource themselves to be managing that. So it would be great to see, something else put in place so that they can be supported. And I know you guys have resources for that. And I think that's fantastic. And hopefully we can all be working towards an end goal that we'll see some really positive change.
That's brilliant. Right, thank you so much. Yeah, and I think that word used, that exposure, is really, really important, because at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't actually know what a lentil is, what the texture is, what it feels like, you might look at it and think, yeah, I'm not right sure about that. But if you've had, like you say, you substituted, you're adding it to it, it's on offer. You get that sensory experience, and that's why I like to grow fruit and vegetables with children, because you get such a sensory experience. Then, today it was because the lettuce had grown, quick wash and they were munching the lettuce, chives, herbs, all, you smell, taste, rub them in your fingers, see how they feel, and children need to have that experience, don't they?
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So thank you very, very much to all of our panelists. It's been really, really interesting, and like you say, it's an exciting time, and there is that hopefully going to be that shift, and looking at that whole child approach of what they put into their bodies is affecting them on minute to minute, hour to hour, and it's affecting our planet, about where we get our food from. Okay, so I'm not sure if we've got any questions in the chat, Paul.
Well, I wondered if anyone from the panel was interested in asking anyone else a kind of question or challenging. Otherwise, one of the things I was interested in, Flora, is you've been doing a lot of kind of community consultation. I know that started in London and is it Bristol and a few other communities. I wondered what the feeling was kind of linked to these food standards and what people's responses were, if you've maybe talked about them, and then also where the families and young people you're connecting with, where they want to see school food moving.
Yeah, no, obviously they're the people who are going to be completely affected by the school food standards changing. We actually had our first national launch in Birmingham on Saturday, and we spoke a bit about school food standards being updated and now. And well, firstly, the parents didn't really know about it, so there needs to be more education there. And I don't know, schools need to tell parents that this is what's happening, because they have, as you said, Hannah, like parents are the people who and kids are who is going to affect the most. So they should say what they want, and things like that. But they were just like really excited that they're especially like vegan parents and plant-based parents, or parents that care about their kids eating whole food diets and eating healthier. They're just at a loss with how the food is kind of served to their children currently, and to have this kind of like beacon of hope really which is what they kind of saw it as when I was explaining about the proposal. It's just like really exciting. So yeah, so I guess people in the communities are just hoping for happy for change.
Because Maisie, sorry, that also then links a little bit what you were saying about your kind of that it's maybe not as simple in terms of your experience, that there's complexity in the way that families and parents and the feedback that you get. Because I guess so much of this story is tied into cultural attitudes, sort of home lives, and I think that's been hinted at as well, that sense of how schools can play a role within a broader community and social change in terms of habits of diet. Because you know that it's already got talked about, isn't it? That meat and two veg as being this traditional idea that still a lot of schools seem to sort of adhere to. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think what's really interesting is schools generally, on the whole, are sort of very rule driven. You know, they've got, you know, the curriculum and they must follow the guidelines. And so when we take on new schools, you can have an incredibly enthusiastic head who really wants to see change and wants to see, you know, better food for the children. But the support staff very often are very much about, oh, rules, rules, rules. And, you know, we like ham in our sandwiches and we like things like this. And we, you know, you must have a roast on a Wednesday and it must be fish fingers on a Friday. And I think it's very difficult to, you know, if you've got a very sort of strong school community that's led by a certain part of the school, you've really got to have a sort of a leadership team that are championing change and sort of paving the way forward. And very often, I know you said earlier, Hannah, you like to eat with the children. That's one of the things that we find is really successful. We say to the staff, we'll cover the cost of your meal if you eat with the children and talk to them about the food and things like that. Because yeah, it's so ingrained, this sort of must be meat and two veg, and you know why, you know, the rules say we must have it 3 times a week, rather than looking at this from a much bigger perspective, both from a, you know, a sustainability point of view and a health point of view. It comes down to, what does this piece of paper tell me that I've got to be doing? Which is again why it's great that the rules are looking to change. It will be very interesting to see how the communities adapt to that and embrace it, hopefully very positively.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think, yeah, and like you say, that work community keeps coming back as well, doesn't it? Something I'd like to ask you all is, if you could put one meal on the school menu, what would it be? So what would you have, Martin?
Well, me personally, well, tofu tacos are always great. But I think the way with this, I think I like to talk about is that the kids are sometimes forgotten in this. Ultimately, they're the customers. And I think part of this has to be the education of the children, because there's no point changing the menus if the kids don't kind of understand it. There's that, it's a classic quote, I use it all the time, about tell me and I will forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I will understand. And it's like, I think we've got to involve the children in with this. One thing I always say when I go in school is about how taste can be learned. And people don't always realize that I don't like that. When actually you can learn, taste is learned. I suppose like 12 times before you actually will accept a food. So whenever parents say they don't like that, they don't like it yet. And I think that's it. So that exposure that Maisie was talking about is so important, about you've got to persevere. And it's so easy to kind of just keep with the status quo and go, yeah, they don't like that. When actually we don't know that they don't like that. I'm sure if you give it them enough, try them out, the tofu tacos, you keep serving them up, eventually they will love them, they will eat them. And that's kind of what we've seen. So I think, yeah, that would be my food. But yeah, I think it's really important that
Yeah,
the children are involved in this journey, because ultimately they're the ones eating their food. So
yeah,
they've got to want to eat it.
I
yeah,
also think in schools there's also that element of peer pressure as well, and it goes both ways. You know, if somebody says, "Oh, you know, I don't like that pea," suddenly you can have a whole line of kids. Yeah, yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. But it works in the opposite way too, because it only takes one kid to suddenly say, "Oh, I haven't tried pineapple before, and it's
Absolutely.
delicious," and the others
yeah,
will go, "Oh, I'll try. I'll try."
My last class, I had Freddie, and Freddie was my superhero. And I knew that if I could get Freddie to try something, everybody else would. So in the mornings at the register, and I looked at the menu, I fiddled the menu, so the plant-based options were always near the top, and I would sort of get him involved. And if he would go with it, you see everyone in the rest class would pick it. They wouldn't even know what it was. And you go in the hall and they'd actually say they enjoyed it. So you're absolutely right. Like there's all these little nudges that can kind of do that. And if you do that in every class, in every school, and in every country, then we're going
Mm.
kind of a good direction.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like you say about the peas. I know I've had children, oh, they won't eat peas, they don't have peas, and then we've grown them, and suddenly I've got no peas in my veg box because somebody's been nibbling them all. So yeah. What about you, Flora? What would you like to see on a menu if you were in year two and you were choosing your school meal?
Ooh, I think like I would just like something that I don't know reminds me of just home and like what's normal. So like potentially like a spaghetti bolognese or with like lentil bolognese or a cottage pie because I think those things it's so easily swapped to lentils or to the pulse without
Mm,
really being noticed. And if it's done really well with like loads of flavors and then the kids wouldn't really notice and it's like a similar meal that they're used to anyway. But yeah, no, but obviously, as you said, like kids can learn and they can try new foods and they
mm,
can get excited about new things as well. But I think yeah, it's about that balance really of just having foods that they know and love and are used to, and then I guess these new foods that I'll probably get exposed to as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, yeah. I think a pasta dish is always a nice one. Like you said, a lentil bolognese, it's got the same sort of that texture, hasn't it, as well? And what about you, Maisie? What would you put on if you were a child in a school? What would you think you'd
Well,
fancy
it's,
on the
it's a really
menu?
good question, and we actually have sort of laminated posters that we keep next to the serving hatches at schools that we encourage the children to write on them what they want to see on the menu. And it's really interesting. You can have two schools that are within 2 miles of each other and have such vastly different tastes. Um,
Right.
and there's always the classics are always really, really good. And exactly as you've just said, what we try and do is just tweak them a little bit. So for our schools, we have a sort of very veg heavy tomato sauce, and that we use on pasta. It goes on pizzas. It gets chucked into and hidden in loads of different things, and
Mm,
then you don't necessarily know that it's got all these other great things in. But I think one of my favorites is always like a dal, just because
mm,
it's got a bit of everything going on in it, and you can up and down the flavor profiles to meet the needs of the kids. So you can make it, some of our schools, the kids are all into spice, they all get into that and they really want spicy things. And you can up it a little bit, or you can make it a bit more creamy with coconut milk. And, it's a great one for hiding lots of great things in.
yeah,
And so, yeah, I always like a veg curry or a dal, something like
yeah. I do like our veg curry at school, I must say. Okay, is there any more questions there, Paul?
I was going to say, Hannah, there was a moment earlier where we should probably mention Tasted as well in terms of that sensory approach, that they're a great organization
Mm,
exploring food through the full range of senses and kind of, yeah, that really spoke to what was being talked about earlier. No, one of the ones I wanted to just jump on as well was that this consultation. So there's an online form, and I think Martin, maybe you hinted at this. There's maybe a perception when you read it. It's a lot of questions, which seems to be the nature of a lot of these things, and I'm sure that it puts people off. But you don't have to answer them all. You just kind of you can skip through to the bit you want. But also the frequency and number, and also where the questions are that relate to the wider environment. Quite far into this thing, you'd if you blink, you'd probably miss them. So. I guess is that what you were sort of inferring at, Martin, where there's this
Are you
sense
being
that
skeptical there, Paul,
no,
about
no,
the
no. I
environmental
wonder
side?
because it could be political. You could think, well, it's sort of by the back door in the sense that they don't want to put the climate nature crisis at the front and center of this because it will be then seen in that same rhetoric as sort of net zero and people it'll get people's backs up. And is that part of I don't know, what are people's perceptions about how this is being framed? And has anyone had any other conversations with people who maybe better understand the direction of where this is going and the kind of appetite for this change?
Yeah, I think you're right in saying, I think when we look about health and climate, about being good for the health and the planet, I think the planet is very much at the bottom of the agenda and health is higher up. And rightly or wrongly so, that's fair enough. But I think what's great is that sustainable food is by proxy usually healthy. So they kind of support each other, and that's why it'd be good to have seen it more kind of aligned together in the consultation, not necessarily so separate and almost like the health is extra and the sustainability is hidden at the bottom. So I think a lot of the responses have been around this win-win situation of getting more pulses, more legumes, more beans on the menu, because that can have then that health benefit, but also because of the DfE, they have this climate action plan, and school food is a massive chunk of schools' carbon footprints. So why not kind of, yeah, get that egg as well? Not probably the best analogy to use egg in this, but do you know what I mean? Like kind of everything needs to sort of come together, I think, and it's often done in silos. Same as the curriculum reviews going on at the moment as well. And it'd be brilliant if sort of the food and the sustainability was fed in that from that as well. So there's a lot of things that sort of need to maybe fall into place to really have the massive impacts that we'd like.
Because also then, sorry, Flora, that then there's an element of obviously the work you're doing, the planet is front and center at this. And I know, Martin, you often talk about nudge and the idea that because also you use language like plant rich, don't you, in terms of trying to frame it in a way that's kind of plant positive to a certain degree.
Yeah, again, yeah, set more plants on plates and trying to kind of like we're talking about, Maisie, talking about the menu. It's sort of what's been added in, not what's been taken out. And I think that's the thing. We kind of avoid meat-free Mondays is a great marketing tool, but it's not actually now. It's got to the point where the marketing is quite poor because meat-free is everyone, what's been taken out. This is negative. So it's I think it's about what's been added in rather than what's been taken out. And hopefully that's what the standards will give us a little bit more freedom for schools to go with that. Sorry, Flora, you can go
But
ahead.
I was also going to just add as well, is that then, Flora, that we're completely missing the point? That should this be front and center, and is this the most fundamental part? And actually, by saying let's nudge or let's do these little things, is it all going to be too late, too slow, and all those things?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we can't tell the future, but it is pretty scary the climate situation right now, and that is a massive part of the conversation. But I think when you're appealing to the wider public and when you are appealing to parents especially, I guess, on the importance of having plant-rich food, having more plants on plates for their kids, obviously you want to talk about the climate and the impact that will have on their kids in the future. But in reality, what they are, in their busy lives thinking about day to day is like, will my kid have a healthy meal? And so I think that that's why having the two hand in hand about the kids' health and then also with the great importance of climate and sustainability as well is good.
I know there's one other thing I was gonna push on as well. This was with Maisie. You talked about the cost and the price of this, and part of the problem being there's these large organizations, companies who are in it for the profit. And is this another example of how privatization, it used to be the case that local authorities were far closer to the delivery of school food, and that also maybe lent more into the local as well. It meant that they were connected with their schools. But is that part of the problem? Do we need to turn all these organizations public? Do we need to bring them into government control kind of?
Well, I don't think that's a horrible idea, to be honest. I think it is. It's very difficult because we have one set of standards, but we have so many different models across the country on how to deliver school food. And there are some brilliant examples where schools employ their own caterers, and that really plays into the concept of community as well, because as another member of the team in the school that's employed by the school, there's a much more sense of ownership around it. And the schools and the caterer can work very closely together on delivering all the things that are important to them that are sort of beyond that the standards set. And when you buy into a sort of bigger third party company, you are getting what they offer, and there is no room to wiggle on that. And yes, when they are supplying food, they aren't looking locally because of the economy of scale. They're going to big suppliers. And I totally get it. We use a very small local butcher, for example, for the meat that we do use. And in many cases, we actually work directly with farms and we will buy a whole animal and utilize all of it. That's not a practice that every school in the country could do. And so there's got to be a happy medium. And so, yeah, I don't know the honest answer to the question, would it be better privatized? Because it's difficult to know. But certainly I would say there's seemingly a lot more success when there is the local authority and the council have more of a power over the food. I think in Wales, it's the model is a bit like that.
Okay, so our final question then, to everyone here. What one thing would you suggest people go and do? Well, I think everyone needs to fill this form in. I know it sounds very long, Paul, but I think that's one of the definitely things I'd say. I think people need to look, because, like I've said, it's one of my phrases, you don't know what you don't know. And if you didn't know as a parent, my child's getting served this every week, or they're getting this, but they're only getting this once a week. Why are they only getting pulses and legumes once a week?
I think you're absolutely right, Hannah. I think the way that the legislation comes down, I think a lot of people probably think, oh, this isn't for me to fill in, this is for my school or for my caterer to do. And having a voice is really, really important. I would agree. I think everybody should do that.
Yeah. What about you, Martin? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say about everybody sort of involved in this. I mean, ultimately, like I said, we talk about the customers, and I think the customers are the children and the parents are of those children. So it's so important to them. Like, that food is there served every day. I mean, free school meals is gradually going to expand. Hopefully that continues. So it's going to be an even bigger thing where the uptake of school meals is going to be even greater because of that free school meal. So we want it to be the best school meals that they can get. So I think, yeah, it's important that parents don't leave it. And I think often with schools a little bit more now, we often think schools are really involved in their food. And I go into schools, head teachers have no idea. They won't know what's on the menu. They don't even know who even supplies their food. And there's this big discourse where the schools are so busy with everything else. You have to admit that they just want to say, do you know what? Someone else is going to deal with that. And I think you said, Paul, about sort of local authorities. It doesn't sound like the worst idea in the world to kind of bring back a bit of centralization where you know who to go to about your school food. Like I said, there can be schools where there's 4 schools along the road, and every school has a different caterer. And one of them's the local authority, and one of them's a contract caterer from America, and one of them does it themselves. And there's all these different models, and some of them work, some of them don't. But I think, yeah, this involves everybody. So I think leaving it, just thinking someone else will deal with it, that's a big sort of risk, and something you shouldn't be doing. So everyone should get involved, just like Brexit. We all should have got involved. Look what happened there. Sorry.
And Flora, there's one thing that people should go do.
Yeah, obviously fill out the form. I spent a long time looking over the whole form and filling it out. And I think a lot of different organizations have, I know ProVeg is going to be releasing a kind of guidance on how to fill out the form to help people, to guide them in that way. At plant-based schools, we've issued guidance as well, and we've got a kind of much easier way to fill it out based on pre-written answers that we have done. So obviously everyone read through it, write out your own individual answers, but parents and teachers have such a finite amount of time. So if you need help, then we'd be happy to share that as well. And also, yeah, just to go to the schools to talk with the head teacher, the sustainability managers, the catering staff and head caterers about the school food and about the school food standards, and kind of just advocate for more plant-rich food and pushing in that direction, because the kids' health and lives depend on it. So yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Flora. So thank you to each and every one of you. That has been really interesting. I'm feeling very peckish now as well after all that talk of delicious food. Like you said, plant rich it's a lovely word. It's appealing, isn't it? That. So thank you to our panelists and thank you to you, the audience, for watching. The next in our series of panel discussions for the summer is on Monday, the 15th of June, which is in a fortnight. And that will be exploring the role of geography teachers in leading whole school sustainability. So please join us there. Thank you so much, everyone.